Welcome to another Pro Video Coalition NAB at home video, which we've done several of these over the last couple of weeks. Since we can't be in Las Vegas, we're doing NAB right here at our house. And I have on the line with me Avid. I have Michael Krulik from Avid Technologies, and he's going to be talking about the brand new Media Composer 2020.4. This is a release that came out on Monday, the 27th, which is what today is. This video probably went up a few days later. But I'll toss it to Michael. He's going to do a little screen share with us, and I'm going to interrupt him countless times to ask questions as he walks us through 2020.4. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. This did just release, and yeah, there's been a lot of work into it. I'd like to start off my presentations also by saying that, you know, in this crazy time, we hope that everybody is doing well, your friends, your family. We know it's a tough time, but we're all trying to get through this, working remotely, and this is why we're doing this remotely. So, yeah, I'm going to start off we'll share my screen. I think many of you may know that in June of last year, we introduced the brand new UI, the new version of Media Composer, which, you know, has the panels. You can go in and, you know, take panels, you can pull them out, you can float them if you want, but we just wanted to create something that was a little more modern, something that was easier for new people to use, like with the workspaces down the right side that you can go in and hide if you want, if you need that real estate back. But I'm just working off of a laptop here. This could be two monitors with a bin monitor and edit monitor. So we're just trying to create something a little new and exciting. But
yeah, you know, let me ask a quick question on that, because if you haven't been in Avid in a while, Avid traditionally, every window sort of floated on its own, and you could organize them as like workspaces, but everything was independent. Now you can sort of interconnect them in a sort of a puzzle sort of way and still save your workspaces, just like you could in the old versions.
I mean, you can do a couple of things. Again, we wanted to customize it because people said that they didn't like that. If I was to open up, let's take a look at this bin right here, and I decide to float that. You know, everything is behind things. You have to move this out of the way. So what we did was we said, okay, do you want to float your bins? You can choose to float them. If you want to panel them, you could choose to panel them. There's also a button that a lot of people don't know about, but under Windows, there is a float all panels. And that basically will pull out all of the panels, so you can go in and organize them if you want, if you don't mind them being on there, but that means you don't have to individually go and do it. Okay. So you can choose to float the active panel, float all the panels, you know, again, set up a workspace the way that you like, and the workspaces that can be displayed down the right side, they can be mapped to a key, you know, just, again, a whole lot of customizing.
Let me ask you one more question while we're, bin containers is one question that new or even old editors coming into the new version of Avid, they're like, whoa, I don't understand the bin container. What is it? It doesn't make sense to me.
A bin container, yes. Basically, the bin container contains bins. But the idea is, and this is something that when we initially introduced the idea of a bin container, if I go in and said I wanted to create a new bin, and let's say go ahead and open up that bin right here, and I decide to float it, what you'll see is the bin container actually has a built-in sidebar, which is the project window. Mm-hmm. You'll see I have project here. The project window, actually, the sidebar was not in the initial release. And it sort of, you know, made people a little uneasy, only because they're used to a project window, even though the bin container contained the project.
Right.
So what we decided to do in the new design, so after the release initially, is we introduced, if you go under Tools, the project sidebar, which comes up, and you can map that as a totally independent list of all of your bins and folders, and still have a bin container, but you can go in and slide or hide that list. So the bin is still, quote unquote, a bin container if you expose that list to that sidebar, or you can close it and it just works as a traditional bin.
So the project is like that security blanket that someone could pull back up and tuck this around their neck and be like, I'm close to back to where I used to be.
They're like, where's my project window? It's there, it's just hidden. But we actually did bring back the project window, which is an addition to a latest release.
Great. Thank you. Sidetracking from the new version there, but
No worry, it's all part of the process. But yeah, it's something to be able to wrap your heads around because again, the bin container can contain that, or you can decide to move that. And also, your bin container can take up an entire window. So again, if I bring up a bin and I float that, and I say, let's say I want this bin because if you have two monitors, your bin can fill up the entire side right here. If I was to open up multiple bins inside of this, you can see that you can have tabs, or I can go in and design my window here to have splits. I can have different views. I can split it up and down, left and right. I have this being displayed as images. I have this, you basically can create a whole view, which is just your paneled display, which is taking up the entire window.
Which that's kind of that's kind of a new concept for Media Composer editors in a sense, to be able to have that kind of granularity for setting up bin. I mean, we used to have the super bin, then we got tabbed bins, and then we have the ability to save bin layouts. But, this is sort of like the natural evolution where you've got a lot more granularity, and not just how you want to display them, or not how you want to display the media, but how you want to display the bins. Like as you were just showing, I got a list view in one, I got an icon view in another.
Yeah, and your bins, you can still go in and say, I want to display it as text. I have frames, I have script, I have the nice thing with the frame mode is you now have a little slider to change the size of your frames, which is nice. And just to jump ahead a little bit, if I go to the show bin map, this brings up an overall view of your bin in frame mode that I can go in now and take that and just change the size of it, scan across my bin, but really in a cool little Google map or video game type of way. So that's showing me an overall view. And in the latest release, we actually changed the transparency because before you'd actually see more of the frames behind it, which was a little, confusing, but now we just changed it. So at least you can pop that out. And that again can be turned on or off, which is a cool new way to view your frames.
Well, especially on a laptop when you've got a large project with tons and tons of clips, it's come in quite handy for me a few times.
Yeah. The nice thing about the layout as well, and just a few things to talk about bins and things like that. If I go to look at some linked media, and I'm just going to go to input and the source browser. Let's go to, let me see, I think I had this organized with some footage. Yeah, some drone demo media. If you take a look at the plugin that's being used in the source browser, you'll see that we have QuickTime plugin, and all of a sudden starts linking to this thing called UME link. This is part of the Universal Media Engine. This is new with Media Composer. And by the way, 2020.4 now is fully supported on Catalina.
Yay.
So if you are on a Mac, it's fully supported on Catalina now. But there was a lot of work that had to be done with that because moving to Catalina, we had to change QuickTime and the QuickTime libraries and a whole bunch of work. So for all the people that were like, when's it going to be on Catalina? It was being done.
Well, let's address that for a second, because when Apple a year or two, or I don't know, 20 years ago, whenever they said, hey, QuickTime is going away, there was like this freak out amongst many media professionals that, oh my gosh, this application won't play QuickTimes anymore, and this one won't play QuickTimes anymore. Forgetting the fact that the word QuickTime, just saying it's a QuickTime, means a lot of different things. So it was a matter of, I'm sure Avid has support from Apple as they're building Media Composer, but you kind of had a whole new architecture that you've put in here now to deal with this transition to, I guess, 64-bit and just the future. I'm going to use air quotes, you can't see me, but the future.
I see you. I see your air quotes. That mainly is it. I mean, it is something that a lot of work was done under the hood in engineering to build in this new Universal Media Engine to help get rid of that reliance on QuickTime, because we know moving forward we had to take care of that. This is something we had to work on. And the nice thing is, if your media does require QuickTime and you have it installed, it will link to QuickTime. If it doesn't, it'll use UME.
Okay.
So you'll see if I click link, watch what happens over here in the bin. And let me make sure I have my, I thought I had my little plugin format. We'll move that in. But if I say link, oh, there it is. It's actually showing me the plugin that is being used, and that media is either using UME to link or it is using QuickTime.
Is there a performance advantage for UME?
It definitely is. Using UME, we do have more things that we can do with that as far as being able to work better with stuff linking via AMA or linking, better H.264,
Okay.
working with higher formats, higher than 4K. Also linking to UME, we can do more work with QuickTime, where if you have QuickTime files that come in with audio or video earlier or later than the actual file, before we used to truncate it, but now we actually add either silence or black to fill that. So we're able to do so much more now because of what we've done with this new UME technology.
And just UME is not exclusive to the Macintosh, right? This is Media Composer Architecture, Mac or Windows.
This is Media Composer, and actually we've done all of this even beforehand when we were linking to OpenEXR and OP1A media. If you go to your Avid Media file folder, there actually is a UME folder.
Oh.
So there's either MXF or UME. So again, depending on what's needed for linking or for rendering or anything like that. But again, all of that is that power of the Avid Media Engine and the Universal Media Engine.
So that's a change in the Avid Media Files folder. I'm thinking back about when the hack, when you could share a bin, delete the databases, and then when it rebuilds them, everything shows back up. Mm-hmm. Or drag the database into a bin and everything, what's in there would populate in the bin. You could see what's in there. Is that sort of the same kind of thing still?
It is. It's still managed media, but one thing we do have to note, and I hope I get this right, is you do have to be careful with the new UME. If you're moving from a project that did link and you need to use UME now to link, you may have to or go back to a project linking. Normally we say you don't want to change Media Composer mid-project.
Sure.
Because you don't want to introduce any things, but there are some times when you may have to go back to an older version to do something. And most likely you will have to relink to any media that was UME'd and recut that in.
Okay.
But this is all, there's an FAQ on the website as to things that are supported and things that you may have to do depending on this new technology. But once it's in there, it's seamless.
Well,
it's really great.
Media Composer has legendary backwards compatibility between versions. Whether it's officially supported or not, we all know how backwards compatible new versions are with older versions. But every now and then, in software, our media software, there are changes that come along where backward compatibility cannot happen, or we wouldn't have gotten the changes.
Right. And if you're using MXF media, it's seamless.
Okay.
Because again, that MXF media, you're just putting that back in and it's linking because it's been transcoded to an Avid format.
Gotcha.
It's just when you are using the linking and the UME, depending on, again, the QuickTime dependencies. Again, all of this stuff is outlined. We wanted to make sure that this was ready for prime time when this was sent out. Also, another thing to point out that's really important is we've also, on a PC, built in the ability to export ProRes.
Oh, nice.
So if you are on a Windows system in 2020.4, you can export a ProRes MOV file. We can also work with OP1A MXF media as well as ProRes.
Great.
So that's a nice little addition with that. Some other things to take a look at is the project window. So if I was to close the project here, we have a whole new visual experience for looking at your projects. So we have a list view. You can change the size here. We have frame mode, and also this is a resizable window, so you can move that around. It is floating. One thing that's also nice is you'll see there's select project or what's new. The nice thing about what's new is it's actually giving me a list of things that are new starting with 2019.6 that I can open up. So for an existing editor, it's actually just a nice way to get a little preview of what's new.
Oh, great, great.
Here's a little discussion about the bin container. If I click on the I for information, it actually takes me to local media or local documentation. So here's a little breakdown explaining what you asked before about the bin container.
Perhaps some of those change-averse editors won't be so fearful of a new version if they can, if it's staring them in the face, they can see what's different.
Exactly. So we're trying to make it a little easier for new stuff. Again, high level overview or a little more information. Here's Catalina support, UME. Here's your ProRes right back to Windows. And going back to select a project, we made this just as familiar as before. So if I say new project, the one thing that's changed is if I go to location, this is where I could choose my Nexus storage or my local storage, rather than having that little button saying local, external,
Oh, great.
Or whatever buttons they are. So it seems a little more natural.
Yeah.
And you have your formats, everything here, your custom format, UHD, any presets you create along the way. Now, the nice thing here about the project selection window also is you can set up, columns. There's only a certain set of columns as far as information for your project, but all of this is stuff you can move around. You can actually click and change and sort depending on names there as well. And the little identifier here, by default, you do get a generic Media Composer icon, but while you're in your project, if you right-click on the source or record window, you can set your poster frame.
Okay.
So you can actually choose a really nice, visual way to see, what your project might be.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of small stuff, but big productions who are in and out of different projects and hundreds of projects all the time. I mean that those little things can be big time savers over a big span of time.
Exactly. And again, also, it's just nice to say instantly. You don't have to hunt down a whole list. You
Sure.
can actually go, oh, there's the editors. Oh, that's that project. So really, really nice. So we'll go into my little demo project here again. And we'll take a look at other bin enhancements. Now, I did show you the UME and the linking, which is really nice. But there's another thing that we added that is going to be really nice for the assistant editor, or how many untitled sequences do you have in your bin, or how many
Too many.
copies of copies of copies of copies?
Too many.
So what we've introduced is a new feature called bulk edit. And then the idea of that is you can choose multiple clips, sequences, whatever you have in your bin. And I'm going to go in and change my data right here. So a couple of things to note is, I do have, all of these .news from transcodes. Maybe I've created a column that I have, different locations here. Maybe if I go to my cuts here, and sequences, see all these copies and sequences. If I select all of these and right-click, you'll see there's an option called Bulk Edit. And what Bulk Edit does is I can choose by modifying my column, so that's any column information. I can change which items, so I could say what I've selected, all of the bin items, all master clips, subclips, or sequences. I could choose to change specific text, a counter I could add, or even change column data to actually be assigned to those names.
Okay.
So just simple here, I want to go in and change all of this to be, let's say it's an episode, so we'll do EP underscore. As I start building, we see the sample result right here. And then over on the right side, you'll see the modified value for everything I've selected. So as I keep adding, that's going to be episode 357 underscore. You'll see that it's added EP underscore 357 underscore. And I also want to add maybe a counter to that. So I have 6 different versions of that sequence I've renamed. And then once I hit commit, watch what happens here in the bin as they've all changed.
Oh, nice. So that's basically batch renaming in a lot of granularity.
Exactly. And if I have, comments or anything added there, I'm going to take all of these. These are some nice drone footage. We'll go to bulk edit again. And instead of it just being DJI, I want that to be, we're going to say drone. And maybe I want to have a specific column, and that column is going to be comments. And you'll see it's actually taking the comments and it's going to name it. I could change, the text to be uppercase and lowercase, all uppercase, whatever I want. But again, once I hit commit, watch what happens here, as it has now added or just changed all of those to be
nice.
Just the names of the clips.
So bulk edit is designed to take data and rename clips on the name column. Does it also work with, can you bulk edit the comments column, or is it only for the name?
Interesting. Let's try that. So if I go to bulk edit, let me go to the comments. That's what I want to modify.
Yeah.
All right, here's your answer. And I'm going to do just the selection. And now in the comments column, I need that to be drone shots, maybe circled. So we'll also add those to be circle takes. And so when I say add that, it did change the comment.
Okay, great. Yeah.
That's great. You saw that live.
Well, batch renaming, bulk editing, whatever you want to call it. It's when you have hundreds and thousands of shots, sometimes it is something that you wish for repeatedly. So it's great to see that.
Even sequential files. So if you have a bunch of TIFFs or JPEGs or anything, you can just take them all and just rename them. So again, we're taking out the tedious work of having to go in and do it individually for every single shot, which is really cool.
Assistant editors may not like that are working hourly, but then again...
Well, we don't have to tell everybody that feature's in
Yes,
there.
Totally.
Although I guess we just did.
Well,
So other things that we've changed in the bin is you'll see that the color of the bin is now just on the tab. That's actually just a setting. So that's a preference that you can set up as a user. I can go into the interface here, go to bins, and say, use the bin background color only on the tab. So if I turn that off, you'll see that the color goes across the entire bin.
Yeah.
And some editors said, hey, we don't need to have all the color there. We just want to use it to differentiate between the different tabs. So again, you can just enable that, apply it, and just as a user setting, have that just be in the tab.
Okay.
Okay. Now you saw the bin map. The bin map was, again, bringing in the ability to see a nice little, overview of your bin.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about that is people liked it so much, we actually have now put that into sequence.
The sequence map. Yeah, I saw that in one of the little blurbs the other day.
So the sequence map is something that can come up as a single panel, so you're not having to scroll up and down, or if you zoomed in a little bit here, you can also map it to a key or to a button. And if you go to your timeline settings, there is an option under, there it is, sequence map, open sequence map as an overlay on the timeline. So one way to also show it is right here. So just like the bin map, it comes up in the corner. I can still scroll through and take a look across my entire sequence.
Oh, okay.
Or if I have that turned off, it comes up as a separate panel, which with the beauty of the paneled UI, I could take that and actually dock that as its own little docked panel.
Oh yeah, well, especially if you're working with two displays, like how handy will that be?
Yeah, so it's actually just a nice overview. Again, just like the bin, being able to see that. So, okay, one thing I also wanted to point out here is notice when I took away that sequence map, the timeline moved.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that with the panels, if I was to remove the bin container, the whole source record window would close and fill. And a lot of people didn't like that. So what we introduced now is the idea of a blank panel. And the blank panel is something that you could dock into your UI so that you could go in and drop things to fill in there.
Okay.
But when you closed it, it would, let's say if I take the inspector tool, I want to drop that here, you'll see what happens is if I now take the inspector tool out,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't collapse everything.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, that's funny in the sense that, did people really complain about that? But I guess so.
I mean, if you have a nice setup and all of a sudden that window moves, you're like, it's disruptive. And
yeah.
We're trying to make something where if you've created a really nice layout, we don't want every time you start pulling things or moving things to have things change.
Well, let me get this straight. So in other words, editors and users complain about a little bit of everything.
Nobody complains. They just want enhancements.
That's right. Yeah. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
So no complaining. We just want to help make the process and make editorial a little easier and nicer for everyone. You'll also see that if you go to your general settings in the interface, there is a selection to, when you close your dock tool, replace it with a blank panel. So I didn't have that on. That's why it was closing every time I did something.
Okay.
Now, if I apply to have that panel there, if I have something like let's say I take the inspector tool and it's there. If I inadvertently close it, it automatically puts that blank panel
Gotcha.
there and doesn't do that closing.
You know, let me make an observation here with just that little preference you showed me. I think that one thing I've always appreciated about Avid is that you're not trying to, oversimplify things sometimes, and you will not be fearful of adding a preference for something that may seem a bit trivial to begin with.
Right.
There are lots of settings in Media Composer. Let's just get that out there. No doubt about that. But it's easy to understand if you sit back and think about what the setting does. So you add a new setting just for something simple like adding a blank panel there, but it gives the editor the ability to really choose what they want to happen when they do something sometimes.
Exactly.
And I think
when editors are working, the last thing they want is to have something look like it changes, because it can disrupt your flow. You're in an editing groove. You're working and you have a cadence and there's an emotion going on or something, and all of a sudden you do something and something changes.
Well,
and you're just like, is it the end of the world? No. But again, we're just trying to help alleviate any of those possible pain points that are there. And again, it's the simple things like you said.
Well, and let me
as simple as that blank panel that somebody's like, that's really helped.
And I'll expand on that, because if you change something like that and your timeline, even though nothing in the timeline shifted, but just the viewing range of it shifted, when you see your timeline move and you don't tell it to move, the editor can instantly be like, did something change in timing? Did I accidentally delete something? Did a trim mess up? And even a shifting of a window like that can trigger in an editor's mind that something has changed that I did not want to change. Not a small thing to happen in the course of editorial.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. It's again, where we're trying to, we don't want to hinder the workflow. We don't want to hinder what people are doing visually. And again, it's customizable. So you
Right.
choose whether you want this to happen. We're not saying it's always going to close or you're always going to get a blank panel. You can decide if you want to enable that or not. A big thing that this, I think is kind of big. The effect palette, if I go to look at the effect palette, one question or one thing that people have asked for years is, why can I change the font in everything else except the effect palette?
Oh, yeah.
Guess what? You can now change the font in the effect palette.
Oh, nice.
And you even have the little splitter here that you can move, just like the panels, so you can actually expose, more effects or less.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just being able to go in now and, change font is kind of huge.
And helpful.
And again, it's just those little things.
Yeah.
And also little things like changing the sliders for brightness. There were some editors that said they wanted to be able to control the lightness and darkness of their icons. So if you go to the interface, so we go to our settings, you'll see that we have a slider to change the brightness of the timecode window. If anybody brings up the timecode window, which everybody knows, you can have that up. That's paneled. You can drop that in. But if I change to make it a little darker, watch what happens here when I apply. Just changes the brightness of the color. Mm-hmm. Because if something's really bright, that's a little distracting if that's moving. And also under the timeline and views, you can change the brightness of the icons and the metadata text. So if I drop this down, you'll see here the brightness of the icons change.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So again, more customizing. It's little things, but somebody might go, that's kind of cool because I don't want my attention to be drawn to something specific there. And lastly, with the timeline, is you can now map these 6 buttons down on the bottom here. So we've added over the course of a couple versions in 2019 the ability to map across your entire top of your timeline, so you can map any buttons here. But now if I was to go into the command palette and I wanted to take something like, let's take the toggle digital audio scrub, and I want to take that and drop it down here, you can see you can now map a little more customizing. So that's kind of cool. I wouldn't say an issue, but a lot of people have been, a little needed some time to warm up to the new titler, the new Avid Title Plus.
Controversy.
Have you used it? Are you?
I have a little bit. I've more followed the controversy on the new titler.
The nice thing with the titler is, or the reason why we made the new titler is because the old titler couldn't go higher than HD.
Right.
So then we introduced, Marquee is something that people, had. I loved Marquee because it did 3D and you could do some really cool stuff there. Then we had the new blue titler, which was required when you did do anything higher than HD. But now that the Titler Plus, and I like to create a workspace that has just one nice big display, because if you're trying to create a title or something, or even with effects, it's kind of nice to be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any hardware, any I/O, when you're in the Avid Titler Plus, let's say I just want to go in and add a little title here above dock. If you do a mark in and out and hit the Avid Titler Plus, and make sure I have the track active, it goes right into the titler.
Okay.
So now, if I want to go in and just start typing a title, I'll hit T, I'll click here, I can start typing Doc Kratzer, ACE, I can take that, I can position them down here. If I want to change the size, I could slide and change the size or type in a value. If I wanted to add just a simple bar or shape, I could go hit the square. By default, it gives a exact square or exact circle. If I hold down, Control Z, if I hold down Shift when doing it, it does give me a free form. I could go in and choose the size.
Mm-hmm.
Another nice thing is we've actually changed the ability, if I go into Draw Shape, and I want to add a different color here. One thing that's nice with the color is there's a little widget to the lower left of the color here. If I click on that, you'll see it changes to a quad. So I can go in now and do gradients.
Oh yeah.
So, again, little things people like to do, little different than just a typical.
Well, the original titler had the gradient option in there if you knew it was in there, and it was quite handy.
You had
so
to hold something and go in and choose it. This gives you a whole new view, and also your drop shadows and things like that are just a little nicer for creation here. But what we've also done is put in a control for if you create just like an effect and save a template. Like I have a whole series of templates here, different looks. If I just take those and drop them, you can see all the different looks that I have created. Now that's something that I've created which changes the entire effect. So if I was to do that same thing and drop that on Stuart here, of course it would change to Catherine because that's the title and effect of that. But if you've created a look, like with a font style, like here I have Georgia font. If I wanted to change Stuart's to be that same font, you can now save the font style and template as an effect. So that when I select Stuart right here and then take the Georgia yellow and drop it on the effect here, you'll see it changes to the font style and color, but doesn't change the actual text.
Okay.
So you can create looks and drop the whole thing on to change it, or if you'd rather not change the look, let me go ahead and take, Doc, and we'll put a different font style on him. Again, select the title. We want to go to Hans Kendrick, and I've now changed that.
Oh, nice.
So again, you can create presets, create a whole library of different looks, and apply them across your titler. So, the titler is pretty in depth, but it's really nice, again, because you are seeing this to your full screen, 4K display while you're building it, and it's all real time.
Gotcha. Titler Plus getting better.
It's really, really nice, even though I'm going to a PC now.
So, Michael, we switched over to a PC because Media Composer is universal between Mac and PC, and there's feature parity for the most part between the two applications.
Oh yeah, and I definitely wanted to point out, if I was going to export from a PC as a ProRes file, I just wanted to prove that under here, you'll see that all your codecs, you have DNX, DNX HD, HR, and Apple ProRes is a selection to create ProRes. While I'm here also, I want to show a feature called Strip Silence. So we've, through Avid owns and creates Pro Tools, we own Sibelius and create Sibelius. So there are some features in other products that we like to, maybe borrow or implement into our other products. So what you have here is an interview with Chris McCaleb, and there is some areas where either the interviewer is, talking in the background, we can't really hear who they are, but maybe want to strip that out, or maybe there's silence in between, times when he's talking, or maybe you have a piece where two people are talking and you want to strip out any silence while they're reacting to each other. You can actually go in to the sequence and choose strip silence from the sequence. Now, from here, I can go in and say, I want to choose, the silence threshold. I actually need to go in and make sure I choose, all of my tracks. So you'll see here where I go strip silence, audio tracks 1 to 4. I'm going to do a silence threshold of about -20, minimum duration of 2 seconds. And I'm going to add a pad of 30 frames on each side, so it's not actually cutting off right when Chris or whoever you have talking goes right up to their dialogue. So when I now say OK, you'll see that it actually cut out any sort of silence that might be there. Just, again, one of those features that helps take out any of the tedious work of going in and having to do that manually.
Sure, and editors who've sat in on Pro Tools sessions, they've seen stuff like that happen. They've been like, oh man, I wish I could do that in my NLE. So there you go.
Exactly. While I'm here also, I can talk about ACES, the Academy Color Encoding System.
Sure.
So if I go in, now this wasn't an ACES project, but you'll see if I do go to my settings, I could, if I created a new project, or I could change the color space of what I'm currently working on to be RGB ACES. Now what this does is it introduces ACES to the entire project and the entire color pipeline. So you can actually work, ingest, edit, and output in an ACES color space, or HDR. So hybrid log gamma, all the different versions of HDR as well. Now, the interesting thing here as an ACES project is you'll take a look at output color space, and we've added, I think, up to 16 more color spaces to be able to work ACES native throughout the entire process. And that's either output color space, or I can also change my displays. So your display color space could either follow the project, or you could choose any color space there, depending on the system that you're working on, depending on your actual monitoring. Now, this element right here, the shot of Chris, was actually Rec 709, it's HD. So I need to go into my source settings to make him ACES compliant. And I want to change, you'll see here under my color adapter, I could choose to any ACES camera format, whether it's Canon, RE, Sony, Panasonic. I'm just going to do ACES generic, and I'm going to say turn the Rec 709 media to ACES. And when I add that and then apply, you'll see that he now conforms visually to an ACES color space.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing here is if I go into look at my color, my values here, not only do I have 1,000 or 10,000 nit waveform display, but I have more granularity when I am changing my color values.
Okay. Is the ACES support new for 2020.4, or has there been ACES in introduction before this new version?
Actually, ACES has been implemented, I think we did it even pre-2019. I know 2019 was a big move with ACES.
Okay.
But again, adding more color spaces is something that we just added with 2020.4.
Gotcha.
And also the granularity here. So we keep working with the Academy and the ACES group to help make this more functional.
And something, adding ACES to your color pipeline, that's probably not a small engineering job.
No, that's a lot of work. And again, it's very specialized. So, we do have a group dedicated to work with the ACES team to get this going, which is great.
Gotcha.
All right, let me change this to go back out to a standard non-ACES. Well, actually, what I want to point out is the new social media format of Quibi. I'm sure you're familiar with Quibi.
Quibi. Oh, yeah.
It was just introduced. Very interesting way to work. The idea of Quibi is you do have a horizontal version of your sequence. So you basically, the way we work, the way our workflow is set up is you are in an UHD project. So I am set up as UHD. I do have my vertical sequence, and I do have a 2-shot here, so 2 people talking.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is if you have titles and stuff, how does this work in a vertical setup? So a couple of things that we've added is if you do go to your source settings and FrameFlex, we do have a new 9:16 format or area of interest where you can go in and keyframe and choose a 9:16 format or extraction of your media. Or you can also work with a masked margin. So we go to our Format tab and you'll see masked margins. And here you can set up a 9:16 display as well. So 1080 by 1920, so that when I turn on the margins in my display, I can also see the area that is going to be extracted for the vertical Quibi.
Okay. Whether Quibi is a great hit and we all love it for years to come, or it dies a quick and painful or maybe painless death, that new formatting can be useful for things besides just Quibi, I'm guessing, like just general, vertical video world that we are a part of, sometimes without our own, without agreeing to be.
Exactly. I mean, the idea of this is we wanted to show me, because Quibi was so specialized, but this can be used for Snapchat, this can be used for other customized formats that you need, and you can decide on the masking that you want to set.
Gotcha.
But the nice thing about this mask margin is you can see that you're going to have to make some editorial decision, because what you'll be seeing at this point is the little space in between Doc and Kate.
Mm-hmm.
So when you create your vertical version, I basically made, or would have made, an editorial decision to actually stack them instead. And so you'll know that, if you've seen a Quibi show, when you do turn the phone a little bit, sometimes it might be a 3-way split that's stacked, or 2-way, but that's an editing decision that's made in the 2 individual sequences. So that way, once you go in and create your vertical version, you would then go to a completely new project set up for 9:16. And then you open up that sequence. So here I have a mobile sequence that is a vertical version, 9:16. I would take that sequence from the horizontal project, open it here, and now you'll see that it's filling in a vertical.
Never even watched any of the footage.
Sense, so that when I export this, it would give me just that vertical extraction.
I guess as an editor, we should hope for great success from Quibi, because that's a little bit more work. Once we get our 9:16 or 16:9 picture lock, hopefully, then we can jump over and make the new vertical version, because that's not always a small task to be able to reframe for vertical video.
Exactly, and while people were trying to figure this out, I mean, there are several different ways that people were trying to do it. I mean, it's just like working remotely. People are like, they're trying to work so they can get it done. We found that this is a good path right now to be able to work. And that's why we built in the 16:9 masks into the software.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, mainly that's a run through of 2020.4. I mean, that hits a whole bunch of, different features. Again, you can work from ingest to edit to delivery, and HDR and high res. We can go up to 16K projects. We also have distributed processing. So if you do have systems that are set up that are connected to computers that aren't being used, and you just want to use as a render farm or to send transcodes. If I was in a certain project and I wanted to go in and export something or send it to my render farm, once it's set up, when I go to render, you'll see your options would be to the application, so it would render it and you'd watch the bar move. It'd be a background process to your current system, or if I said distributed processing, it would send it out to any computer that's not being used, and I can still work.
Well, that's nice.
So you'll see the actual processing will come up, and you can see it this would happen in the background.
Yeah.
As a background service.
That's great. Yeah, great in a facility, or if you've got a bunch of machines, especially at nighttime, as some of them are sitting idle. That's really cool.
Yeah. And then to top that off, and this is all part of our post pipeline, which we're talking about, which is, Nexus, editorial, distributed processing, and also this new thing called Media Composer Enterprise, where you can actually set up people in your facility to have different access depending on what their role is. So if I was to go into the administration of Media Composer Enterprise, what that gives me is the ability to go into a specific user. Like I'm going to go to user number 1, and I can turn on or off functions so that when they log in, they can, not have a capture tool or not have the list tool.
Oh, wow.
Or more importantly, for exporting. How many times have people been afraid for security reasons? They don't want somebody to be able to export to a QuickTime file because that could go out on the web.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, user 1 can't export a file. You can actually even dictate what sort of formats they can create, or maybe even not create projects at all. So
Wow.
If you're a producer and they log in, they will not even be able to create a project or export a file. You can actually dictate by, again, what role or what things you want them to be able to do or not be able to do is really kind of great. So you can set up a best practice. You can say, how many tracks of video or audio can they, create.
I think
Media Composer Enterprise just gives total customizing to the experience for editorial.
Yeah, I think that's a place where you can see Avid sort of dominance in Hollywood and features and episodic television and stuff in play there, because those are probably requirements that were dictated to Avid by the content creators, where it's like, we have to be able to make sure this facility or these people can't export. They can only, do whatever. It's a pretty interesting options there for the enterprise.
Yeah, and even for formats. I mean, if your facility says, well, we do only create UHD projects, I could go in and turn off any other project so that if somebody does go in to create a project, they can only see the UHD projects. And I can even turn off certain frame rates. So that way, somebody is like, well, I don't know what frame rate to choose. I'll choose 25.
Oh, yeah.
And you're spending time having to change everything to, be the right format.
Really nice. I think, when people think about Media Composer, sometimes there's a whole ecosystem around Media Composer in the media creation space that is more than just the the offline storytelling software, and this is stuff that Avid has to engineer and support over many versions of many years. So it's a lot more than just the NLE that is.
Exactly.
It's good to know about that.
NLE. I mean, I think you saw that. So
for sure.
I just want to be able to throw in some other stuff because people have heard about these other things.
Yeah.
I just want to let people know about what they are.
That's great. Good question from out in the ether. H.265 support.
Well, that is not in the current software, but I know that is in a future that is coming up, and that's also being used by UME.
Gotcha.
So the help of the Universal Media Engine will help with us working with H.265.
Great. Yeah, I think I remember.
It's coming.
Yeah, a roadmap from a while back, seeing that, or that perhaps that was one of the Avid Connect sort of features that people talked about, like was one of the most requested or often requested, and I think I saw where Avid said, hey, we know it's needed, so it is on the roadmap. Michael, thanks for taking us through that demo. Once this video hits the web, the 2020.4 update will be available, ready for download, because on Monday the 27th, it went live for users. I appreciate you taking the time. And
thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, hopefully next year at NAB, we'll be back in Vegas and things will be back to normal. Wish you much safety with you and your folks and everybody at Avid. There's a big company, a lot of people working around the world, so we hope the best for everybody involved.
You as well. Thank you so much for taking the time, and best wishes, and be well and stay safe, everyone.
We will see you soon.
Thank you.